All right, last talk of the day, and then hopefully some fruit and some drinks. It's getting hot in here. Today we're going to talk about the more of patterns and principles. Probably not yet principles, but it's been mentioned a few times. Our job is changing. How is it changing? What's affecting us? And what I was trying to wrap my head around in the beginning of the year. This talk has evolved through many iterations as kind of technology has emerged, but the patterns pretty much stay the same. Just the implementations are becoming more actual, and you can start seeing them in the tools. Just want to mention this up front. I started this kind of website, for those who know the CNCF landscape. This is for AI developer tools. We started with roughly 200 tools, maybe in January. We're closer to 500 tools right now. So it's my daily job to kind of keep this also up to date. And whatever I come across as tool, I put there. So you don't have to track the whole ecosystem and all the social media for all the little tools. So just for you to have your daily fix of AI tools. Who am I? For those who don't know me, most people know me around my work around DevOps and the DevOps Handbook, if that rings a bell for some people. Moved into DevSecOps and then pretty much get bored about it because it was like 10, 15 years, the same CI/CD, just with different words in a way, which is still cool. But I kind of am a person who likes to learn new things and kind of surfs on a little bit of the chaotic early period and trying to make sense of these things. I did that with cloud, I did that with mobile, I did that with serverless, and now it is AI, and that is what excites me, actually. I curate content at the community, AI Native Dev community. That's also why we're here at the meetup. And because where I travel, I try to tag on a meetup, and that's how I kind of get to know people who are also interested in this thing. So, for those who remember Cloud Native, again, I was there in the beginning, and it felt like, oh, we're just going to do the same, but now in the cloud. It changed, like microservices, we wrapped our heads around, like VLANs were no more a thing, access management needs to be different. So the same thing is actually happening with AI native. And the reason for this slide is like a lot of people just tag on and bolt on a little bit of AI of what they're already doing. I think it is, you have to rethink your workflow as you're currently doing this with AI. So it's good to get you started to kind of get to know it, but like it is fundamentally changing the way we work, and I'm trying to also kind of highlight that in my session today. I made these like beautiful diagram. It's probably not the best diagram, but I'm not going to talk about code generation, which might be a surprise to you, because it's all actually been mentioned in the two previous talks. Code generation is just happening faster, better, more quality, right? And we mentioned 2 times that review is actually getting the bottleneck. And the human side, the agent side, bigger chunks, and so on. So in the first thing I was going to say is, if AI writes the code, they're doing the dev, right? And we're becoming the manager of those producing the code. We're becoming the manager of the agents doing this. Part of the review that we already mentioned. So, if I review code, I'm actually colorblind. So, red-green diffs are really hard for me. There are different ways. I can have a very elaborate chat telling me about my code, which I don't have the stomach to read everything it tells me, right? And maybe we can do it a bit different, right? If it just like synthesizes certain changes with a comment, I get instant context. So you see, it reduces the cognitive load of me reviewing, which is, even though we are still in the loop as the humans, kind of actually helps me to do this. This has nothing to do with code generation. This is just helping me kind of do better and faster code reviews right now. Why does it have to be a div? I can probably see on a diagram immediately, if I'm doing infrastructure as code, what is wrong and not wired up. I do not need to see a diff of the code. Just to make you thinking, if I see that diagram, sometimes it's easier to do a review. Okay, Google had this thing, Notebook LLM, if you remember. So they built a podcast generation of code diffs into their Jules kind of code gen tool. Maybe if your agents are coding all night and you'll listen to the 5-minute snippet episode in the morning, that's what they're aiming for. Anyway, just an idea. It's reviewing, and people are experimenting with different ways of reviewing stuff. This brings me to a concept called the moldable development environment. So we're all known in your IDEs that it's very text-centric, very code-centric. But as we're spending less time in there, maybe they have to be more, get better at code reviewing stuff, right? And code reviewing could be either some graphics, some podcast, but it could also adapt itself to the task at hand. Maybe the domain specific, I'm doing a change in my data model, I'm doing a change in UI. So what if actually the review system adapts itself to me doing a review? So this is mostly concept. There's a whole thing called the Glamorous Toolkit, or you are happy to try this, but the concept of a moldable development environment that molds itself to what is the task at hand. There's actually also a moldable exception environment that helps you review exceptions. So the same pattern applies because you're ultimately responsible for when the agents go wrong also. Now, we talk a lot about vibe coding in this community, right? But it's rarely talked on as a way to do reviewing of an app. So this was a kind of golden nugget for me. It asked the agent, can you prove me that this is actually working? And the agent built a whole vibe-coded app to prove me and to do a better job at reviewing, right? So we can employ vibe coding on that as well, with UI components, with domain-specific things to help us there as well, and we become just a better reviewer of that. Now, sometimes tools are trying to auto-commit, so you don't have to review, right? If they're feeling certain enough, and so they flip the table by saying, let's do a commit, and you can revert if you don't like it, instead of you having to say yes all the time, right? So it's a different mentality of doing this. But to do this, we started seeing the concept of checkpoints. You can roll back up until a certain point in your chat invocation, in your approval. So instead of it going off for a long period and then saying, I didn't like it, and then it goes off again, you kind of go on the different steps and say, I didn't like it up until here, and now you can go. So checkpoints are fundamental in a safe reviewing system there as well. And for those who hate the cloud system, right, access management control on AWS is one of those most complex things that you don't want to touch. It is happening in our browser. We have to say what our agents are allowed to do. And yes, I know there's YOLO mode, and we say we'll do whatever, we'll run it in a container, but still, we certainly not want the agent to change. So we have to do almost like user identity access management for the agents there as well. So they're becoming more complex. So I'm not just a reviewer, I'm managing the whole system. Who gets access? What is it doing? Am I okay? Yes, no. And then on top of that, I have to worry about costs. I mentioned in the first talk of Thomas, like, don't care about costs. Yeah, until you get your first bill. It's a little bit like AWS. Yes, don't worry about it until you get that one system that goes up and down. So I'm not saying you have to worry about it, but there's a certain awareness, like we did with cloud native, it's like FinOps, how much are you consuming? And maybe you can give it to a cheaper model that costs less, delegate this. So I get it, for adoption, you'd say, just use as much as you want, because that's the typical rig. But then kind of it sets in what is actually costing these things, and are we using it efficiently for the models that we actually want? Funnily enough, we saw the emergence of those max licenses. Use it to the max, unlimited use, right? until they figure out, like, oh, there's actually people using this unlimited, so we have to put a limit on these things because people are changing this. Funny story, somebody who optimized their sleep because now they can code for what is like the checkpoint of 4 hours, and then they kind of have a kind of period they can't code, and then they go back again. I know, funny how they do it, but the CLI is changing no matter what we do. And so that kind of like upfront conventional coding, think hard what we want, have the discussions, and then get into the zone and code, not happening anymore. It's like, oh, you what? Need my attention? Need an answer? Need an answer? It's almost like micromanaging your agents as a boss, right? And we don't want to do that, but it's maybe the best we got until we get better reviewing systems and things that help us actually with the review. And congratulations, you are now all ops. This is what it feels if you were ops before DevOps, people throwing code over the wall, giving things you've never seen, you've never written, and you are responsible for running them, right? So congratulations, we're back to this. Okay, so this was, you became a manager, congratulations. But we haven't actually discussed what you want to build and how you want to build this, right? So that's typically the role of the QA, kind of the architect that says, oh, this is what we're going to build. This is how we're going to build this, all the requirements and stuff. So that is also changing. A very, very lightweight thing is you putting some of that knowledge of how you want things built into a cursor rules, or you name it, whatever flavor du jour you have about kind of specifying the things you want. This was a very simplistic early phase of this. Now we're seeing a standardization. It's not anymore, well, it is still Claude MD, but there's now an agent MD, genAI MD, and all those things. They're starting to standardize that piece, which is great because tools can now reuse that. Same thing, we have now tools that convert things from cursor rules to Claude rules and kind of, but it's similar to the S3 bucket that became standard. So we're seeing a few of those standards emerge just by the first kind of adopter of a certain tool, which is great. But we're specifying actually what we want. This is not the review, this is specifying what we want. And so we're getting towards, somebody called it, we had prompt engineering, then we had context engineering, and then we had intent engineering. We specify what we want, and the machines will take care of the implementation, given that we've given them the guidelines, how we wanted them to build this, and what we want them to build this, and go from there. It was very early on, GitHub research, so it's not anymore like, yes, we still have the ghost text and the chat, but you're specifying what we want, a plan is made, and the code is being generated. So that's where we're heading in the IDEs. And Kiro was probably the first IDE to make this very explicit into the IDE. Kiro, for those who don't know, it's like an IDE that was built by AWS outside their Amazon Q system. But they really make the difference between we write code today, or do you want to do the specification-driven approach? Right? And how does the specification look like? They use the ears pattern, but there's other formats. Think of this mostly as BDD type style descriptions with examples and things. So it is becoming more and more as a standard thing. GitHub as a spec kit, still experimental, but again, another company supporting the idea of specifications as such. This company I help, Tessel, they have a concept called usage specs. So what they do is they convert open source packages to actually documentation. So when you use the library in your code, you can import those specifications on how to use them. So it's a usage spec. It's not how I want something to build, but it's almost like documentation optimized for an agent to be used. So what can you put in spec? What we want to build, how we want to build this, the design, how we're building this. So the whole workflow, first do this, then do that, then do that. And then the rules, the prompts, the snippets, and we can even ask the agent to update the files and how we do things. It was already expressed a little bit, like the knowledge about that process and write that as well. I often use the thing that if I could, and then I say, please write everything that I get into a specification that I can reuse. So it's almost like saving the memory of something that you've been working on. And then I start from there doing further coding there as well. And there's a flip side to this, is it's not only about your specification to code, it's also legacy code to specification. Because once I have the specification, I can just change it to, let's rewrite this Java, lo and behold, system to Rust. And I just changed that, right? Probably not going to work that perfectly, but you understand the idea. And the idea of the specification is that it actually aligns agents with humans. We tell them what to do, right? But for those that have been around long enough and understand still UML and kind of those things, documentation and writing things down actually also aligns humans together. No, I didn't mean this. Oh, let's change this. Because if it's not clear to you, it might not be clear to the agent. Right? So that is helping us in several ways. Funny thing is that like specifications are, again, on the rise, where we believe that writing everything perfectly is going to help us. Guess what? Like, specifications are also political. I know I wrote this, but actually I'm going to do something different. That actually I'm going to do something different doesn't exist anymore with agents. So it's going to be a fun thing how we're going to handle those politics with specifications. Now, the specifications grow, kind of security, QA, like performance. So we'll have to break them down. We cannot just say, this vibe coding all these things, save this to a specification, and then say, here's a specification, just go at it. People learn that if it gets longer, you have to break it down in smaller tasks. A little bit like humans. You don't say, implement this feature of 100 different things. You break them down. And that's a challenge that we're now facing. How do you actually break them down? How do you make sure that the tasks are not overlapping, actually not dependent on each other? And that was also mentioned by Robert. Kind of that dependency tree is like a very challenging to kind of break this down automatically through planning. And then they just become part of our Kanban board. And so what we do is we just watch the agents and say, agent, please code this, done. Right? So we see them kind of progressing and working together. So this kind of made us, is we care less about the specific implementation. We kind of worry about actually the intent was right. So that's where we kind of move from kind of low-level developer to becoming more of an architect and how we tell things to the agents. So let's go one step back, because how do you actually know what we need to build? We think it's a good idea, but maybe we should ask the users. Maybe we should think about what is the feature that actually going to bring value. So I think this is definitely where vibe coding shines. Product owner in the past had to ask a developer who said like, oh, I don't have time, like put it somewhere in the backlog, wait for me to do something. And they couldn't like see it. Now you could say once the developer was free, then they could code on this. But you forgot that part of this is very iteratively. I see it, oh, it's actually not what we needed. It doesn't really feel good. So there's like a very throwaway thing of experimentation to figure out actually what the user is you want, the feature is you want, right? So that discovery process is where the vibe coding shines. You say, oh no, it's actually not what I didn't think about this. And that is great for that. And why stop at generating one thing and working on one thing? Why not have multiple solutions? This is a very simplistic thing of saying, hey, I want 3 versions of the website, 3 designs, and I'll pick the best one. I'll implement me 3 versions of this algorithm, and I'll see which one is best. So the choice is changing the alternative of only having to see one solution. So vibe coding is still maybe linear, but the fact that you can spin up multiple things makes it also very powerful. And there's 2 reasons why you can do the parallelism. Either we've already discussed, doing tasks at the same time, right? Breaking down the tasks and then kind of saying, oh, now you can do this in parallel, or doing multiple kind of variations of the same task and then selecting that. Both valid, both helpful in selecting what the right thing is that we have to specify in our intent. We've seen kind of an approach, kind of doing some directories, version 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. This is another way, using Git work trees to kind of parallelize some of your code, working on different directories on your laptop, but still doing it in in separate Git trees. You start seeing that the agents actually start snapshotting and committing things locally for the rollback. So we're having a version system before the version system. We're not using the Git one, but we have like a one that is before, and some people use JJ for that because it's very lightweight to do commits, and then they merge the branches there as well. You can do it on your laptop. Being mentioned that you can do it in the cloud, you can do it in the container. So kind of the founders of Docker are also now into a company called Dagger. They allow you to spin up multiple coding agents within containers. So here's the example of just saying it hooks into your MCP by saying I want 2 variations. It spins up 2 kind of containers and it kind of runs it from there. So I've showed it. I hope I made you see that we worry less about the delivery, but more about the discovery. What is the right thing that we need to build? Instead of it's still like, okay, this is the only thing we can build, the only thing where we have money for. Let's build that and keep that stable under control. And then the last piece is converting everything we learned in that whole cycle to knowledge. That's already been mentioned as well. Now, what are other sources of knowledge? Documentation, right? A company called Contact7 kind of made a very great interface of you able to use the most up-to-date documentation when you generate code, because the LLMs have been trained on all the versions, right? That helps getting there as knowledge. I can also turn my code base into lessons. New engineer comes in and says, I want to learn about the code base, right? Okay, here's a bunch of lessons generated with AI. Or a person leaves, right? There's no drain because the AI will help them understand and keep them up to date with the knowledge. And it's been interesting that even Claude Code is tipping and tapping into that learning aspect. So Claude Code also has a learning mode. You exploring things about your code, asking things about your code base. It's not just about your code generation right now. And then it could be as simple as, the first kind of very, very early science for this was somebody keeping almost like a log of everything they did. This was the memory. First we did that feature, then we did this, and this is how we applied it. Almost like your change log. The first thing, so you don't re-implement the same feature again next year, right? Just keep that track of that knowledge as well. And I find this interesting. It's a little bit hard to see, but this was a screenshot of Devin while you were coding. He says, "Oh, this looks like important. This looks like knowledge. Should we save this?" Right? This was probably the first. Now in Claude Code, for example, you can do the hash sign to save something into the memory. Also knowledge. So you see how like inline knowledge discovery and saving is something that will creep more into the tools as well. And then reusing it across, that's we mentioned before, not only one agent, even across tools, putting it into a file, that's we mentioned, putting it into a memory database, putting it into a knowledge database, having an orchestrator agent say this is what actually should go in. And then we start going into even more uncharted territory is let's spin up like a bunch of Claude systems, like a swarm. I often refer to this almost like the mob programming versions of our coding agents. Spin things up. They have a bunch of rules. Each of them have a different role, and then they come back in the evening and they run. I find it an interesting experiment, and it probably will kind of, if you specify things, you will get good results. But the longer these things run, the harder it is to review, because it becomes that big for you in doing the review. And then we're back actually to pattern number one, how to deal with better reviews. And then you can use that knowledge, not just for the code generation, but if somebody has a question on the agent, on your PR, on your decision making, all the knowledge is there as well. So that's it. Those were the 4 patterns. I hope they make sense to you. The last thing I want to highlight is that if you're a senior developer, you're likely have been moving to this side because you care about actually running the system. You've been cared about QAing, the architecting the system if you're more senior. You've been getting closer to the business because you actually wanted to know what was the best thing you should be building. And then you start documenting things for people around you there as well. So actually the whole thing drives us to be even more senior and helps us with tools to kind of go better in our journey as a developer as well. It's probably for my new deck, but you can see there's an emerging new flow where we're managing the intent, gets broken down into plan mode, something in parallel gets done, and then the review is still where we say yes, no, and then all across the whole thing, we're saving the knowledge. But all this is actually, you can think of this as a CI/CD flow, but it's happening on the developer's laptop. And then it, gets pushed. And so that's why I think that once this new pattern starts changing and people are adopting this, the whole CI/CD workflow that we now have centrally will likely change as well. Because it feels a little bit redundant, right? Like we're merging here locally and then we're doing it back again, but everybody's doing this locally. So I have no clue where this kind of is going directionally, but I think for those saying like, oh, we're putting AI in our DevOps and our CI/CD workflow, I think this first has to settle, and then kind of we'll see how that one will change there as well. Last thing, we're doing the meetups here, AI Native Dev Meetup. We also have a conference coming up. I know it's in New York, but there might be some international people or people willing to travel, and also live streamed most of it. There's a CFP, we can help people to travel, that's useful. And so you see it's centered around specifications, generating the code, doing the review, learning knowledge, and getting stories out like tonight. I hope you enjoyed the session tonight. And if so, you can find way more of these talks on our YouTube channel, on our podcast, on our website, and we're trying to get the stories out. And it's great that you were willing to listen, and also to the speakers and the organizers to help us find the people to do. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
No, you can go.
Thanks, Patrick. And I encourage everyone to watch your talks because it's fun to see the involvement of them, how you keep changing the slides and new ideas. So the spec part, I'm really trying myself to write these specs and have them. What I'm not really good at yet is, or I'm still trying to, I'm struggling with, is like, at the end of the day, I mean, code is where the truth is, right? So do you have some, and for me, it's still very sequential waterfall-y. I write the specs, then I'm generating something, and then the markdowns lie there, and sometimes the agent picks it up, and sometimes it doesn't. Do you have some insights, experience, thoughts of how like code and specs continuously update themselves, kind of like in a continuous way?
Yeah, what you start seeing is that where we initially started with specifications as we were writing documentation, you start seeing the increase of using examples in there. So it's almost like executable code. I know it's pseudocode, but at least there's a way of kind of referring to this piece that I described should be covered in this test. And so one of the like in the BDD of Kiro and others, you can specify those examples. Now, I agree that it's tricky if the AI writes, kind of code and AI writes the tests, that is a challenge. But you can force this in a way that model, maybe it's multiple agents. So that's what people have been trying to kind of like keep it under control. But the main answer to your question is find a way to relate the piece of specification to executable tests and then have that generate. So at least you have some link. That's the best I've seen so far.
Yeah, I'm trying this with playwright tests, and it fails me big time because they're so flaky and they break all the time. So I'm not good at that at all yet.
Yeah, well, playwright even without AI was flaky. That's just a matter. That's because of the selectors and all that way is very clunky. But what I was referring to is even just the basic TDD and BDD tests, which in general you'll have a better result and then go into a browser as such.
Yeah, for some reason I've never thought about BDD until tonight. I'll try this.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Maybe I misunderstood a little bit, but you're saying that CI/CD will evolve, and in some part of way I agree with you, but I think, and it's you made the emphasis during your speech about the reviewing, and reviewing it's a huge part of the CI/CD. So of course you have the unit testings and static analysis and everything which run into the CI/CD, but the way I see it is that it will be even growing the CI/CD to help with the reviewing process, because most of the work which was done before in an ADE will get basically done at the review process, and the review process is basically will be the step of the CI/CD.
So I don't think I contradicted you. It's probably something you heard in this. I'm not saying the CI/CD loop is going away, the central one, but I think it will be evolving in a way that it maybe learned from feedback that agents already did, like internally and automatically. So it isn't kind of we throw everything, we trust nobody, and then we do the CI/CD system again over there. Think of this almost like having 12 or 30 different feature branches being tested by different people and different tools. And in that way, now most of the CI/CD is kind of like, okay, at the central pipeline where everything's getting. So I will see like a parallelism there happening as well. I agree with you that you cannot put this like straight to code. That's why I emphasize the review system. But when people say, oh, I'm putting AI in my CI/CD loop, I think it's helpful for some quality and more ML ops or AI ops that you're doing there. But I think interfacing with the multitude of agents doing reviews, doing changes, the question comes is, how much risk, how much review do you want to do in these pieces as well? But that brings up the piece of test coverage again. So and I hope, I don't know where it's heading, but I feel this needs to change first before we actually can see the impact on the central CI/CD systems.
And my second question is, basically code was a way for humans to understand more than machine what needs to be done. Because in the end, machines are fine with bytecode and they don't give a shit about the world we have in the languages. With AI generating more and more code and doing basically the heavy lifting, do we still need, in the end, an intermediate programming language?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why not have AI just, I know it's not ready yet, but directly write bytecode and use other means to check that we're happy with that, even if we don't ourselves understand the intermediate code or the whatever code it's generating.
Yeah, it's something that comes up quite a bit. Like people say, well, kind of below level, and we're moving up the abstraction. We don't need to see this anymore. I think as we moved into the cloud, you also had more and more abstraction. You actually need to see what the disk is doing underneath. You actually need to see what kind of the network is doing. When it fails, we want to, right? That's my answer, right? But not everybody will have to look at the failure. But it could be, and that's why I mentioned the multiple exceptions, if it adapts the UI in a way that I can understand what is failing, and I don't have to see the intermediate code, that's great. Now, I'm not in the camp that says the code being generated, if we throw enough money and kind of resources at it, it will be perfect. I am still somewhere an ops person that says, I do not trust this. And there's no proof or no way that we can be certain about it not hallucinating and doing bad things. Now, we can throw a lot more tools to it, like static analysis, and we can do it in Rust and kind of create some better kind of system. But do I fundamentally trust it to go live without having to look at it? That brings up the question is, I would do that if the risk is okay. But I don't know what that risk okay means to you, right? So if something went wrong, and that's the story of the intern pushing something to the code base and then pushing that to production, if I have a test harness that stops it, I'm fine with going there. Or if I can contain one change to 2 users and they have low impact, then it's okay as well. So kind of that brings the discussion to what risk are you willing to take to what kind of systems do you want AI to touch? But I haven't seen any hints by people saying, we trust this piece enough by going directly into prod. I've been looking really hard because definitely I want to have that DevOps connection that like we kind of went through to production. Yes, there's people taking risks and saying, oh, it's fine, this is something that can crash. But do I actually want that to happen? You could say we have done automation before, right? CI/CD, and instead of one system, we brought up 100 systems, but that was predictable in a certain way. This one, I don't know. I still feel uneasy about this in that term. But I guess we probably move somewhere to food and beer or something.
I'm happy with that.
Thank you.